Yes, good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to this evening's stream. I already did a 3 and a bit hour stream this morning, mixing Chelsea by Dragged Under. Tonight, we're doing something a little different. This is, as you just heard, a version of Africa by Toto. But every single thing that's in this mix, and I'll just play you a little bit of what goes on near the end when it gets absolutely bananas. This is all from the same 7-string bass. And so, yeah, there are, including the folders, 96 tracks going on here. There's a lot to get into. So there's a lot to look at. And what I want to do is firstly kind of break down how I did this, but secondly, essentially just erase the mix, destroy it and start again and make something that sounds a bit more pleasant to my ears. Because I do remember I did this just over a year ago. I filmed and edited this in the middle of January in the studio, and the heating at the time wasn't working, and you could see your breath in the studio. It was that cold. So I remember rushing the mix and being absolutely frozen solid. So, apparently I've received 100 messages today with Restream chat. Good evening, everybody. Good evening, good evening, good evening. Welcome to our 7-string bass Africa stream, for those who haven't quite had enough of the Africa meme. Tonight I'm joined by a nice Malbec as my co-host. Feel free to drink along if you are of reasonable drinking age, and do drink responsibly. So, with that out of the way, let's have another listen to some of this stuff. So this is, from the start, this is the drums leading into the start. So let's break down these drums. So we've got a kick drum, which is literally just, it's a 2-bar loop. If you can just see, there's a little kind of notch here. After every 2 bars, there's a little notch. That's actually the end of a loop in Reaper. So if you drag the end of something and just make it longer, it will just loop and loop and loop and loop, and you get these little dips. So I've not had to press copy paste. I've just dragged it out until it's as long as I need. And so, let's have a look at these. I can't completely remember how I did this, but I think I had a DI track and I had a mic or a 421 on a cabinet. That's right. That is what happened. How did I get the counter to be next to the buttons? There's a little, if you right click on the transport controls, there's a button for center transport controls. Apparently I have that unticked. It's probably a hangover from the fact that I've used Reaper 4, 5, 6 in a row. But yeah, on that bar where the transport is, you right click and there's show play status text, show time signature. There's all sorts of options. Basically in Reaper, if you can't find something, look in the general area and right click and you'll find a menu with about 30 options in it. That's one of the best things about Reaper for me, is generally if you look in a general area and just right click, there's a menu with stuff. So yeah, let's have a look. For some reason I didn't name some of these, but some of the others I did. And so I've named them 421 and DI. So this will be the 421. Yeah. So the 421 was on the Zilla 4x10 that I had at the time, which is available from two notes, known as the Bass Beast. And so that had a 4-2-1 on it. It had a very kind of mid-rich, mid-forward sound. I'll just find another track to solo from that. So it was a Hartke amp, which was very kind of mid-forward, mid-rich, but not aggressive the way I had it set on the day. And then there was the Groove Tube's Ditto, which is a Valve DI box. That's and you can hear more fret buzz on that. And it's also got a kind of a slightly lower mid tonality. Mix them together. Ooh. Are they out of phase? Press the phase button. They are slightly out of time with each other, so I might do a bit of time nudging around. If I use shift and up to, see how all the waveforms are kind of doubled up. I'll probably go through a lot of these and start nudging them around to make sure that they're time coincident. So, interesting that these have been flipped round, so that says DI, that says 421. Ah, let's just offset the DI to be a little further back. And see how this bass sounds. So that's very, very close indeed. If I hit N for nudge, I can actually nudge things by a couple of samples left, couple of samples right. Eventually I'll get something that's so close. Zoom out a little. I'm just looking for these big humps in the waveform to be practically on top of each other. Oop, that's what happens when you've got a tiny little loop. Yeah, there we go. So our bass channel is finally right. But let's go back to the bit we were talking about, which was the kick drum. The kick drum was 421 and DI. And the first thing that I'm going to do is, like I did with the other one, zoom in, make sure they're in phase, and then just try and make sure that the just zoom out a little bit. There we go. Try and get these so that they're in phase with each other. So out of phase, we get a very hollow sound. In phase, we get a very different sound. What's a virtual mix rack? Ah, so there's a gate on the DI. Right, okay. So we're probably going to deconstruct a lot of this mix. Let's take the reverb off this kick first. Move that gate. And this is something you can do in Virtual Mix Rack. I'm going to move this from here to here. That's something you can do in Virtual Mix Rack that I absolutely love. I literally just transplanted it from here to here. So I can now delete that DI Mix Rack. And that's now going onto a folder. So this will now affect all of that kick. And it's not a very nice sound at all. But it's something to work from. Something we're going to need to do something extreme with. There we go. So if I just absolutely suck the low mids out of that. And then gate it, because it was going bwom, bob, bwom. Bwom. And if I turn off debleed, still quite stuffy sounding. Let's take that distressor off there and just get this kick so the level's right. So this SSL is kind of moulding that cut into something that's a lot less stuffy in the low mid-range, because we want this basically to emulate a kick drum. So let's try a couple of things. Let's put a compressor in there, the 401, one of my favourite compressors, quite fast release. That's now been evened out, so it's like a kick drum going bum, bum, bum. Now we really need to tone sculpt it. I think that sounds reasonably like a kick drum compared to this. And it's really loud, so I can turn down the output there. And I can turn my headphones up a little to match. Because I do want a nice set of drums. What's the drums going through? So drums are going through a London preamp for some saturation and then a mix bus and nothing else. So what I'm going to do at this point is I'm going to add virtual tape machine to the drum kit group, which is what I tend to do with its defaults, which 30 inches per second, FG9, 2-track. Oh, feel that low end. And True Iron as well, because True Iron from Kazrog gives me a really nice weight and saturation on my tracks, and also as a very useful output reducer. So it will make things sound louder as it saturates transformers, which gives it a little saturation, but we've only done a kick drum so far. And it does sound a little tubby still, but not a bad start. Let's get a good old Reaper digital EQ on to finish the job. And listen, just sweeping around for that tubby frequency. I found it. 180-ish hertz. Let's just EQ it out. There we go. Not the worst kick drum I've ever heard, and it's actually not a kick drum at all. So that's how I processed that. So I've got this kind of flap going on that's supposed to be a snare. So the first thing I want to do before any of this is probably take out all that low end. I'm going to use the SSL EQ because it's really good at scooping stuff out. And I'm pushing into this preamp here. There's a weird knocking sound. Probably, let's just find that on the EQ. There we go, 500-ish hertz. And then add some top end in. There we go. So with the kick, let's bring in a Neve EQ because that's got some nice broad sweet sweeps. back again. Yeah, you can't keep me away. If this becomes something like a 2.5 hour stream, that'll be nearly 6 hours today of streaming. I've literally just released my version of the mix of Chelsea by Dragged Under. That's now live on the channel and is a world away from this, which is the 7-string bass version of Africa. Gonna take some time to do the things we never had, and so on and so on and so on. YouTube's still processing the video from this morning, but then they have been taking quite a while to process live videos over the last few weeks. What is with this guy saying rapture is near, Jesus is coming? That's been the same every week. In England, we call that jam tomorrow. It's like, this is going to happen. When? Very soon. How soon's very soon? 100 billion years? It's very soon in the cosmic scale of things. Oh well. $4 a.m. stream and a 4 p.m. stream. You, sir, are insane. But hey, glad to have you here. I've got a nice kick and snare going here. Now this is where it gets interesting, because the hi-hats I got my nail and I went blacka 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 on some of the high strings, and it sounded a bit like a terrible rendition of Pac-Man, but it was what I needed. Let's just take the mixer away for a second and zoom in on these, because this is another thing I never did go through and make sure that the times were aligned properly, and it's tricky to do, but generally if you can find a key part of a wave that matches, because it won't match perfectly. That's the thing about trying to match phase, is that if you've got two slightly different sources, how the heck are you supposed to make them be in phase when the waves don't even look the same? And what you do is you look for the big bits, and then you look in for a couple of medium-sized bits. Not a great way of describing it, I know, because not every frequency is going to be in phase. That's kind of the problem there. But if you can get the majority of it in phase or in time alignment, then that's how you get the nice sounds. There we go. So they now should go together. Right, I'm going to take that gate away because it wasn't helping. That's not helping either. What was I doing? I really was rushing this. So first thing I want to do is get the SSL and absolutely take all the low end out. So it sounds like I'm trying to brush my teeth with no toothpaste. And then I'm going to use FG stress to bring some level up, whilst also keeping any rogue parts under control. So that's going to a non-linear reverb. Interesting. Last time someone said Rapture, it was in BioShock. Would you kindly? Yes, great game. Right, so that needs some significant EQ work after that fact. Needs a lot more air on the top. There we go. That's really scooped out and now just goes chaka 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 chaka. And because it's human, it's got a humanness to it anyway. Now this is where it gets a little clever. I was using Joey Sturgis's side widener. I can't remember where the heck I put the installers for that. I do own a copy of it. I just can't find it. So instead, I'm going to use the Isotope Ozone stereo imager. There are multiple ways to do this. If I was to use microshift uses a pitch shifting type algorithm to make things sound stereo, which for something that's quite high-endy and quite percussion-y would end up with a very noticeable like chorusing type phase effect, which isn't what I'm going for. So in here I can hit the stereoize button and play around with the milliseconds, and it doesn't just put a delay on, it does like harsh comb filtering, clever stuff. Probably wants to be on a different reverb because that non-linear reverb's making it sound like a machine again. Cool, probably just want to turn those hi-hats down now. Cool. Onto the bongos. Anytime I call anything an instrument in this, obviously it's not that instrument. So I want to be moving the 421, which is the mic, to match the DI. Looks like I might have already gone and done it on this track, maybe. Because this is revisiting an old mix of mine. Bum, 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 bum. Right, so that's got an EQ already on it that I'm just going to leave, which is bringing out that kind of vocal range. Boop, boop. Bit of a high frequency boost and scooping all the lows out. And then it's got a saturation, which is just stopping it from sounding lifeless and boring. And then the air at the end there is just lifting out that top end, so it doesn't just sound like, it actually sounds percussive and bright. Now there's percussion 2. What's percussion 2? Bum, 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 bum. Just make sure they match, because they don't match. Oh, that suddenly brought that far further forward in the mix just by lining up the waves. So something I was doing originally is I was using a lot of saturation on these preamps to try and sit things levelly in a mix, and I think on reflection that was actually taking a lot of the detail and a lot of the life away from the sources because it was too much saturation. So lesson learned, I'm backing off the saturation here. It was like 9.5 down to 7, and obviously I touched up the high end there, but this really, that on the right hand side, jumps out at me now. And then percussion 3, let's just listen to that on its own. Oh. So there's an extra layer here. God only knows what I was doing. It's been time stretched, which is weird. Just make sure it's in phase because it looks like it's not. Try that. It's a lot closer in phase now. Let's do that again with all of them selected because that'd help. Let's get rid of that. Use an SSL EQ instead because it's far cleaner, which helps it stick in the mix. Sounds a bit messy, but I'm guessing this was just to make it not just a 2-bar loop. I think I recorded this as a 16-bar thing just to give it a bit more of an organic feel. And let's use the imager again. Let's have a look, just hit F2 and see what resampling algorithms we have. Try a different one. Sounds worse. That probably sounds better. Let's try it in with the other drums. It's all a little bit ahead of the beat, so I'm going to move it back a bit. You know what, it's not in time, so I'm just going to turn it off. No, I can't turn it off because I said it'd be in there on the video, so I'll just turn it down. But crank the high end so that it's got some detail in there. And percussion 4. That sounds interesting. Let's give it some more air. Let's bring that in. Right, so that's underneath the choruses to give it just a bit more fullness. I remember now. So then we've got the toms, which were just about perfect. They've got a big mid scoop and a nice big epic top end and low end boost, and then this MDA pseudo stereo which takes them from this to this. And it does comb filtering and a stereo delay as well, so it makes things sound absolutely huge. And then I've got a room reverb and a non-linear reverb going as well, so that it goes now. Awesome. So it's time to bring in some actual musical instruments and not listen to ticking for hours. So I lined up the bass, which is an important instrument to me. Hello again, Carrot Top Gaming. There's people watching this at all hours. What's wrong with you people? In the nicest possible way. There we go. Let's bring a bit of 3K out of this bass to get a bit of clarity on it. So this is nice, and then under the chorus, I might want to add a little more compression maybe. There we go, now the big boy comes in. So, with it being a 7-string bass, I down-tuned the bottom string from a B down to an A. Let's just make sure these are lined up, because I don't think they are lined up quite properly. Oh, look at the wave difference there. That's a mile out. Let's just zoom that back out. See if that works. There we go. Get a bit of growl off that. So it's a second track underneath the original. It seems that my playing was a little late, so I'm just going to drag it all back. That's better. They actually play in time, which I wouldn't have been able to hear on the original mix because there was a stereo effect on the sub, which makes no sense. Okay. Oh dear, everyone's running late today, whether it's wine or whether it's sleeping in or whether it's... Hello to all my regulars. The Council of Davids are all here. Marty's here. Let's enjoy this Friday evening with a cover of Africa, shall we? Feel free to join in. If it is, like I said earlier, legally appropriate for you to do so. So now we've got the bass and we've got... Oh yeah, that's holding down the low end solid. Gonna take some time to do the things you never had. Oh no. So this is where it gets interesting because now we get to things like the guitar channels. So let's just, for a second, instead of soloing everything, I'm just going to mute the major food groups, keys and vocals, and then start adding these in, because I've got... these nice channels to add in. So that little bap there is probably me being a little overzealous. These don't line up at all. What was I doing? There we go. Let's line those waveforms up. Let's see what kind of a mix-ins we got going on here. And let's do the same on the right and see if that needs any individual work, because I might take the EQ off this group and do them individually if they need it. These wave files are a million miles away. Yeah, so these are a lot darker than the out of phase versions would have suggested, but they'll be a lot clearer and a lot more present in a mix. So let's just see. So that's nice. But it is quite muffled. So I'm just going to put an extra compressor just on that left guitar there, just to stop that spank coming through, because we don't want it. That's nice. So let's just listen to those in context. Right, this right hand side one just needs a little EQ work. It's a bit muddy. And needs... Oh. Seems the playing wasn't ideal, but it'll have to do now. Does sound like my playing could have been a bit better, but let's have a look at what we got here, because this is where the rubber really hits the road. These wave files are a million miles out. You know what, I'm just gonna mute the 421s here on these guitars and just go with the DI tracks, because these are distorted. They're going through Kazrog's Thermionic through Friedman Brown Eye. I'm going to just put a good old Reaper gate in front of that just to stop any crap getting through. And close the gate. That's going to need some manual gating. That's probably going to be the same. Yeah, because there is a bit of copy and paste going on in this song, because I remember clearly that I was frozen to the bone and was like, look, I'm I'm not doing this a million times. Bow, bow. Let's see how that probably needs... Oh, wall of sound with a big beast in the ribbon, which means it probably needs a low mid scoop in this new mix that we're doing. Down in Africa, gonna take some time to do the things we never had. Oh no. And the reason that I only had little stabs of distorted guitar is that's how it is in the original, is there's only these little stabs of distorted guitar in the song, and it's quite a heavily compressed distorted sound that sounds a little bit ratty and a little bit boxy. But it seemed to work for the track because it wasn't the star of the show. Watch out, everybody. Martin's hitting the like button. Ooh. Oh, dear. Careful. Right, so we now have effective, clean and distorted guitars. Now for the keys. This is the interesting one. So let's see what we've got on the oh. So that's actually the work of 5 parts. So let's start with 1 and just zoom in on it a bit. So the waveforms are nowhere near lined up. Adam, what were you doing, man? So I've lined them up now. Oh, they were massively out of tune as well. Interesting. And I suppose I probably can treat these 3 as a stereo group. So I'm going to do the same with the other 2, is I'm going to grab the wave files, and a very nice benefit of the way that Reaper's folders work, if I haven't already mentioned this, is that I can see 2 waveforms overlaid over each other, and that's how the folders work. You just get to see it lined up. So by doing that, I can very quickly see where the waves are time aligned or not, and not just have to eyeball it. They're directly over each other now, so I know for a fact that those are about as time coherent as they could possibly be. And then I'm going to do the same with track 3. If I make the folder bigger, it's a very useful feature. I can just drag them around. I really should be dragging the DI forward, but either way works because there's only 2 sources. So, right, so I've got 1, 2, and 3, which are, yeah, so that's a riff folder. So I'm going to pan them a little bit. And that's now mid-focused as all hell. Because I've phase aligned them, and it seems that the original sound was more mid-centric than I realised. There, 300-400 Hz, get rid. And give us a good poke in the upper mids, 2K-ish. And then the tapped pianos. I'm going to turn the delay off for a second while we sort out the phase alignment here. Yeah, it's something that saved me days of work, especially after I started using foldering and just saw that that was an option. Like, even with distorted-ish, relatively high frequency contentful stuff, I can see that they're now phase aligned, and let's just open this one up as well. Ooh, miles out. There we go. That's nice and clear now. Really suck out that low mid. And then get some nice delay on it. Bit less than that now. Now that they sound clear as a bell. Because that's me tapping on the bass going. I think I was using two hands, I can't remember, to get that nice piano style. That needs significantly less low end. Ooh. That can always go up volume wise to compensate for the amount of negative. Yep, so the fundamentals are aligned. Let's move on in the song. It looks like there are more bits we've not covered. So later on there's a sixth. There's that funky little bass bit. So let's make sure that's aligned. So when you say fundamentals aligned, there's a lot going on. Looks like I might have already done it on this particular track. I might have already been quite aware of it, but nope. And it's already fading out at that point, but yeah, nothing is quite lined up. And as you record things, they won't be lined up because a DI is taking an instant signal, whereas any microphone is taking a slightly delayed signal because the sound had to travel through some amount of air to get to the microphone. So physics means that in reality you're not going to get a DI and a microphone to blend perfectly. Sometimes that, in fact a lot of the time, that makes for a sound that we actually like. In this case, doesn't seem to be that way. Yeah, just because things aren't perfectly in phase doesn't mean it's necessarily a bad thing. Quite often on guitars, for example, one of the reasons that you use two microphones on a cabinet is not just to get the different qualities of the two microphones, but to get some interaction going between the two microphones, because they're not perfectly the same. The capsules might be slightly weighted differently, slightly different distances from the cabinet, and all those little things add up to do things like filtering out certain harsh frequencies if you do it right, or it can be leaving you with nothing but hollow sounding frequencies if you do too much of it. There's a certain balance, but like a lot of metal bands use things like what's called the Fredman technique, which is where you're using two microphones to cancel out some of the frequencies that we don't really want, because a heavy guitar is basically a wall of white noise. You have this nice organic way of filtering out certain things at the recording section without it being a processing thing, which means that like microsecond to microsecond it can change, which can make it a very organic result. Anyway, I'm getting off track. That end lick is good. That's very muffled sounding to me. Let's get rid of that. And compress it even more. There we go. So that's now going to stand out a bit. It's still got too much low end going on. There we go, the SSL has sorted that straight out. What else have we got? So we've got the... Oh yeah, so when this was originally recorded, it sounded more like this. Which I was quite happy with that, because I'd got that as a one take, and then I was like, yeah, okay, I'll have that. But it's an interesting thing that I added just today before the stream, Little Altar Boy from Sound Toys, which is a pitch shifter that sounds like a kind of a classic Eventide type pitch shifter. And so mixing that in, it gave me a top octave, which was very late 80s. This is very, very like something like Fame by David Bowie. It's that kind of fame, 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 fame. It's that because Eventide's gear could do this really cool pitch shifting stuff, but it didn't sound anything like anything we have now. It just was. Right, so that's got a bit too much delay on it, so let's just add a bit more non-linear reverb on it and see what that does. Right, so that's just underneath the solo. I just added a lower octave for some reason, probably to just beef that up. Let's just make sure they align, and then I never did make sure that these aligned. Woof. There we go. Let's listen to them now. Right, so that lower octave's nice, but it needs a lot less of that honky honky. That sounds really quiet, but I'll bet underneath the solo it just adds just what it needs. Yeah. Something that sounds too quiet in a mix, if it's a supporting role, can often be just where it's needed to be, because not everything has to be at the front of the mix to be useful and relevant. Something that I learnt a long time ago is I can have loads of things going on in the mix. They don't all have to be right here and right at the top of the mix. Quite often they can be 10 or 20 dB down, and if you turn them off, you still notice and you still miss them. So that's something that's really helped me, is it's okay to have something not stand out in the mix, but I do like clarity at the same time, because clarity begets clarity, as it were. If I can make each element of a mix clear, there is likely to be more space for more elements, which is why they don't have to be that loud, because they can be heard without fighting. she's waiting there for you. Toms. Away from you, 100 men or more could ever do. I bless the rains down in Africa. I bless the rains. Okay, I'm getting ahead of myself because it's time to look at the vocals. And the first vocal isn't time aligned. And yeah, really should have done that. So what's on the vocal bus? Oh, it's just a little bit of preamp, console saturation and SSL saturation. So not really doing much. Nothing I need to undo. I'm going to look at this vocal performance. And I'm going to add Howard Benson vocals on this, just to be weird. I do love this Howard Benson vocal plugin. I can compress the life out of things. Add a bit of tube warmth, will that work? Oh yeah. Make sure the EQ's before the compressor to scoop out loads of that low end. And a little bit less of that, I don't know, 400-ish hertz thing, that honky. There, 280. Ooh, nice bit of multiplier there for that stereo thing. Forgotten words are ancient melodies. Right, so I'm going to copy this over to the backing vocal. I have two backing vocals, right? Why does that one have such a massive dip? Because that's got a really nice pure note on it that just made it stand out by a country mile, right? Right, so backing one has even more low end that needs to go. And the one on the right got loads of low end. Not as much. Did I time align them? I did not. Come on, potato. Small potato, small potato, small potato. I'm going to get in trouble for copyright if I start singing kids' TV stuff. I watch far too much kids' TV these days. Hello to our viewer. There we go. Nicely time aligned means nicely focused. So I'm just going to use some more EQs after my Howard Benson vocals on the backing just to scoop out the low end. Because they're so low end heavy. Doof, 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 doof. I'm going to use this whole setup on that vocal top line as well, which is that I bless the rain. That's going to need some real... There we go. And at the end there, I just added on the whole vocal group, just a gentle compressor, just in case the group decides that it's getting loud. So that when they all play, it just softens it off a little volume-wise, without being overly aggressive. So most of the time the compressor's doing almost nothing. They've both got some hideous low mid stuff going on that's dominating the mix. So that's on the left. Right, so I just scooped a load of low mids out of the backing vocal and then just turned up the main vocal. Beard scratched. Serengeti. Gullfoss is the real MVP on the master. See, Gullfoss, what Gullfoss is doing is when there's anything nasty in the mix, it just finds those frequencies and just dips them. It's beautiful. Okay, I think that's got it. So not the longest stream in the world. It's got a nice master fade out on. You can show the master bus by right-clicking somewhere, and there is a right at the bottom. There's a blank space. I can right-click there, and there's show master track. And the show master track allows you to do things like have a volume automation on the entire output. It's very, very useful. And I think last but not least, after Gullfoss, I'm just gonna try something a little weird. I'm gonna try Kazrog's True Dynamics just before Gullfoss on the LA1B, which has a very clear top end. I think that's nice. It's gonna get a bit loud. Cool, so I'm just going to wind that back a little, turn the DAW down for you guys a little so you don't go deaf, and just make sure this big bit doesn't get distorted. So David Ross says, what wine did I go for tonight? This is actually a rather rare vintage of a particular grape called a Was Open. I went downstairs and I had a look at what was open. Mickey was drinking a Barefoot Malbec, and so I snaffled a glass in the 2 minutes I had just before the stream. It's been a long day, but this is quite nice to have coffee with the morning stream and a wine with the evening stream. But I just about think that I am done there. If anybody's got any questions, now is a good time before we go offline, because what I'm going to do is I'm going to export this and then drop it into the old Premiere project. And I think I'm going to just take the old version offline, put a new version up with the new mix, and see if it fares any better and spreads the word around the magical internet. because that would be amusing if it did. I mean, it would be good fun to have something where I'm known for an Africa meme and playing 7-string bass, because it's something that I do from time to time. I've left the 7-string at the studio, unfortunately, so I don't get to play it here. But yeah, it's something that I do like to do because it's a lot of fun. It's very, very silly, and that's just my thing. There's epic and then there's silly, and my two main basses are behind me for if I need to do actual real recording, but when I just want to get silly, I got that 7-string in a trade actually, so yeah, it's strange, but I think that is going to be it for this evening, and so like I say, probably tomorrow, the new version of the Africa video will go up, probably with better background images, because originally it had like a picture of rain under rain, then a picture of the country of Africa, a picture of a camera of the Olympus, then a picture of the Serengeti. That kind of, to me it was hilarious, but nobody got it, so I think I'll just take those out, because it was all green screen, it was all done in our live room in a half day, and it was done in 4K, which my laptop of the time just couldn't cope with. But my new machine is an absolute monster and should be fine with it. So, what am I using for 5-string? I don't actually have a 5-string right now. I have a 6-string, which was a custom build that I got from somebody, and I have the 7-string. Are Active Electronics the way to go for 5 or more strings, in my opinion? Yes, absolutely, without a shadow of a doubt. Active Electronics, when you've got a lot of dynamic range like a 5-string and beyond, is absolutely crucial to being able to get the right tone for me out of any bass, because you don't have to go crazy with the controls. A good Active Electronic setup, you should be able to leave everything at 12 o'clock and get a very nice sound out of it. You can't have that high frequency loss really that you get down a cable with a passive bass with the sounds that you're going for in most instances of extended range stuff. And personal preference thing, but I've never seen a successful passive 5-string player. It just doesn't seem to work. Maybe in jazz, but for me, once you go to extended range, you're probably also looking for clarity. But again, that's a personal thing, that I tend to find that bass players who look beyond the classic designs are also looking for better tone, quote unquote, and better tone for me means clarity, and clarity means having some sort of preamp, because as soon as you put a long cable onto a passive instrument, that's the first thing, is the tone becomes dull instantly, because a lot of signal is lost through capacitance, because the cable then acts as a capacitor and then by physics ends up being a filter. Whereas Active Electronics, even if you don't change the EQ, if it's perfectly flat, means that the cable's that long, it goes from your pickup straight to that circuit, and that's it. Very nice way of working. And it just, for me, gives possibilities of tone. What I used to do when I was younger with active basses, which I only realised later on was a very bad thing to do, is I did what I used to do with passive basses, which is crank everything to 12. And it turns out that when you've got the bass on full, the mids on full, and the highs on full on an active bass, that quite often can sound horrible. The problem with Active Electronics is, unless you've found a sound, you can find yourself searching for a sound, and everything on full is not a good way to be, because then the bass will be boomy, the high end will be clanky, the mids will be too pokey, and then you put the bass back and you go, oh, that sounds terrible. I have learnt that generally, having all your settings bang on the middle click, go from there, and then set the amp up, and then if it's still not quite to your liking, you've then got bass, middle and treble to do the fine tweaking with. Plus, especially as like a cover band guy and a wedding band player, I love having Active Electronics, because what I can do my usual sound on this particular bass, which I'll just angle the camera down a little. This is my John East preamp in my jazz bass. Stay. There we go. And so this has got a volume and pickup blend here, but then it's got bass and treble here. Then it's got mid and a mid sweep here, so I can pick what mid frequency. And it's also got an active passive switch, so if I want a passive sound I can do that, which is useful. And it's got an emergency switch up here to pick between pickups when it's in passive mode. And also on the treble it's got this push pull. You can hear that click. That's it putting a super high end brightness boost in. So if I'm doing slap stuff, that can suddenly it goes from to ting ting, which depending on the genre, I'll probably play a little bit of slap bass in an evening without that top boost. If I'm doing something like a bit of Stevie Wonder, get that classic 70s thing. And then if I'm doing something like I do Uptown Funk, and we'll have a section in there where you really want to go for that really super high-end sound. And I'm on a wireless pack. I can be halfway over the room and still completely just change my sound just by playing and just click. And then later when I'm done, push it back. Or for something like a reggae style dub style song, which sometimes we'll do, I've got a bass boost, so I can bass boost and then play more gently, because I usually play with quite a lot of character. But if I want to play gently, suddenly I drop out of the mix a bit. If I bring some bass in with an active electronics, suddenly you get that nice dubby, which for a section of a song can be just what I need. And I'm not switching basses, I'm not switching pedals, I'm not going over to the amp to change anything. So active electronics for a bass player can leave the power in your hands. It's not all just about the tone full stop, it's about versatility. However, if I was in a band like, say, The Ramones, where I just wanted a passive precision bass sound for a whole set, that would be fine. I like those kind of sounds, but they have to be right time, right place. So, yes, hope that answers that question. If that's all the questions we got in chat, then I'm going to head off because it's already 20 past 10 in the evening here, and I've been streaming since just about 9 o'clock this morning on and off. So it's time for me to go. I'm going to render this out, see if I can actually render the original 4K Africa video and get that uploaded. So thank you everybody for tuning in. Hit the like button if you haven't already, it's very much appreciated. Do subscribe for more videos like this. Like I said, there was a 3.5 hour pop punk live mix this morning. We'll be releasing more videos with microphones from SE soon. Vola Guitars are sending me a guitar, that's going to be awesome. There's a lot more stuff coming even though we're on lockdown, and as soon as the lockdown's lifted, we're right back at it. I've got a big list of videos that we're going to film and it's going to be amazing. So thank you everybody. Look forward to you all hearing this final version of Africa come out on the channel within a couple of days with the revised video, and I'll see you all later. Thank you very much. Goodbye.
Thanks for watching, guys. If you enjoyed this, feel free to check out our other videos as you can find here, or check out our Facebook and Twitter, or our Patreon page, which helps us to make more videos like this. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.